The glass tower, Valentina Reeves checked her watch for the third time in as many minutes. The digital display read 6:42 a.m., early by most standards, but potentially late by his. She quickened her pace across the marble lobby of the Westbrook Tower, her heels clicking a nervous rhythm against the polished floor. "Morning, Ms. Reeves," called the security guard. "Mr. Westbrook arrived at 5. Of course he did. Valentina forced a smile and nodded, mentally reorganizing her morning briefing. 1 hour and 42 minutes behind schedule, by Dominic Westbrook's warped standards that practically made her a truant. The private elevator whisked her to the 87th floor. As the doors slid open, she steeled herself, adjusting her blazer and straightening her spine. The office was eerily quiet this early, the floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Seattle's skyline still draped in pre-dawn blue. "You're late." Dominic's voice cut through the silence before she even rounded the corner to her desk. He stood in the doorway of his office, immaculate in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. At 38, he'd already built Westbrook Innovations into a tech empire valued at billions. The newspapers called him brilliant. His competitors called him ruthless. His employees called him, well, not to his face. "The presentation for Nakamura is incomplete," he continued, not waiting for her response. "The market projections are based on last quarter's data. Fix it before the 9 o'clock call." "Good morning to you too, Mr. Westbrook," Valentina replied, setting down her bag. "And the Nakamura presentation was completed with current data. I sent it last night." He paused, narrowing his eyes. "Check your email." "I sent revisions at 3 a.m. "Of course you did," she muttered under her breath as he disappeared back into his office. Valentina had been Dominic Westbrook's executive assistant for 18 months. 18 months of impossible deadlines, midnight emails, and curt commands. The position paid exceptionally well, came with premium benefits, and had already advanced her career more than 5 years at her previous company. The catch? Working for a man who treated human interaction as an inconvenient necessity. By 8:30, she had revised the presentation, prepared his talking points, scheduled 3 international calls, and was halfway through her first cup of coffee. The office had begun to fill with other early arrivers, all moving with the same purpose-driven tension that permeated Westbrook Tower. "The Tokyo office sent over their quarterly reports," she said, entering his office with a tablet. "And your sister called again about Sunday dinner." Dominic didn't look up from his monitor. "Tell Camille I'm busy." "I've told her that the last 3 weeks. She says if you miss another family dinner, she'll come here and make a scene in the lobby." That got his attention. He looked up, a flicker of something, amusement, annoyance, crossing his face. "Fine, put it on the calendar. Anything else?" "Yes. The charity gala for children's cancer research is tonight. You're expected to give remarks." He frowned. "Cancel it. Mr. Westbrook, you're the principal donor. Your name is on the invitation. Then you go." He waved dismissively. "Take notes on who attends. Network." Valentina took a deep breath. "With all due respect, sir, these children and their families are expecting you, not your assistant." Something shifted in his expression, so brief she almost missed it. A shadow crossing his features, tightening the corners of his mouth. "Fine," he said. Fractured reflections. The charity gala glittered with Seattle's elite, a sea of designer gowns and practiced smiles beneath crystal chandeliers. Valentina kept to the periphery, tablet in hand, monitoring Dominic's schedule as he moved through the crowd with practiced charm. The public Dominic Westbrook was a master performer, confident, charismatic, the perfect billionaire philanthropist. Only Valentina noticed the subtle tightness around his eyes, the way he checked his watch when he thought no one was looking. "Everything all right?" she asked during a brief moment between conversations. "Fine," he replied curtly. "How much longer?" "At least another hour. You need to present the donation at 9. He nodded, straightening his already perfect tie. "Stay close. I want to leave immediately after." The evening progressed smoothly until Dominic took the stage. He was midway through his speech when Valentina noticed a woman in the front row, elegant, silver-haired, watching him with unmistakable intensity. When Dominic spotted her, he faltered mid-sentence, his composure cracking for just a moment before he recovered. Later, as they were leaving, the woman approached. "Dominic," she said warmly, "it's been too long." "Dr. Harrison," he replied, his voice unnaturally stiff. "I wasn't aware you'd be here. I wouldn't miss it. Your work with pediatric cancer research is commendable." Her eyes held something Valentina couldn't decipher. "Your father would have been proud." Dominic's jaw clenched. "If you'll excuse me, I have an early meeting tomorrow." The drive back to Westbrook Tower was silent. Dominic stared out the window, lost in thought, while Valentina reviewed notes on her tablet, occasionally glancing at his reflection in the glass. The rain started as they pulled up to the building, a sudden, violent downpour typical of Seattle in autumn. "You can go home, Ms. Reeves," he said, finally breaking the silence. "I'll review the Singapore contracts myself." "I need to organize the notes from tonight's donors," she replied, following him into the building. It won't take long. The elevator ride was silent. When they reached the 87th floor, Dominic headed straight to his office while Valentina settled at her desk. An hour passed, then another. The storm intensified, lightning illuminating the dark office in brief electric flashes. At midnight, Valentina packed up to leave. Passing Dominic's office, she noticed the door ajar, the space beyond dark except for the city lights filtering through the rain-streaked windows. She approached to say goodnight, then stopped. Dominic stood by the window, silhouetted against the stormy skyline. His suit jacket was discarded, tie loosened, one hand pressed against the glass as if for support. His shoulders were hunched, his posture so unlike his usual rigid confidence that Valentina almost didn't recognize him. "Mr. Westbrook?" she called softly. He didn't turn. "Go home, Valentina. She should have left." Instead, something in his voice, a rawness she'd never heard before, drew her forward. Who was she? "Dr. Harrison." A long silence followed, broken only by thunder. Finally, he spoke, still facing the window. "My father's oncologist. She treated him for 3 years before he died." "I'm sorry," Valentina said. "I didn't know. How could you?" "It's not in my company biography." His laugh was hollow. "Cancer took him 6 years ago. Today would have been his 70th birthday." The revelation hung in the air between them. Valentina remained still, sensing there was more. "He built this company from nothing," Dominic continued, his voice low. "Everyone said I couldn't fill his shoes, that I was too young, too inexperienced, too cold." He finally turned, and in the flash of lightning, Valentina saw what he'd been hiding all day, raw grief etched across his face. "Sometimes I think they were right." In that moment, Dominic Westbrook wasn't a billionaire CEO. He was simply a son who missed his father, carrying a burden too heavy to bear alone. Valentina did something she'd never done before. She crossed the invisible boundary between them and stood beside him at the window, watching the storm rage across the city. "I think," she said quietly, "he would be proud of what you've built, what you're still building." They stood together in silence, watching the rain, as something fundamental shifted between them. Daylight Mask's morning arrived with harsh sunlight and unspoken questions. Valentina entered the office at precisely 6 a.m., unsure what version of Dominic Westbrook she would encounter after last night's unexpected vulnerability. He was already there. Of course, immaculate in a navy suit, barking orders into his phone as if nothing had changed. When he saw her, he gave a curt nod and continued his call, turning away to face the windows. The mask was back in place, the brief glimpse of the man behind it seemingly forgotten or deliberately buried. "The board meeting is at 10, he said after ending his call, his tone businesslike. "I need the quarterly projections reformatted. And get Bradley from legal to review the next-gen acquisition paperwork." "Already done," Valentina replied, handing him a folder. "And I've moved your lunch with Senator Williams to tomorrow. The development team needs you for the product testing this afternoon." He took the folder, their fingers brushing momentarily. Something flickered in his eyes, recognition, perhaps, of what had transpired between them, before he retreated behind his professional facade. "Thank you, Ms. Reeves." The day progressed with its usual relentless pace. Meetings, calls, decisions worth millions made in moments between coffee refills. To anyone watching, nothing had changed between the demanding CEO and his efficient assistant. But beneath the surface, subtle shifts were occurring. When Dominic snapped at a junior developer during the product demo, Valentina caught his eye from across the room. He paused, moderated his tone, and actually listened to the young man's explanation. When an investor meeting ran late into the evening, he ordered dinner for both of them without being prompted, remembering her preference for Thai food. Small things, nearly imperceptible. Yet to Valentina, who had spent 18 months cataloging his habits and moods, these changes spoke volumes. A week passed. Then two. Their professional dynamic maintained its outward appearance. He still demanded perfection. She still delivered it. But something had softened at the edges. Late nights in the office became less about proving points and more about genuine collaboration. Occasionally, after everyone else had gone home, their conversations would drift beyond spreadsheets and schedules. She learned about Camille, his younger sister who ran an art gallery in Portland. He discovered Valentina's background in international relations before she'd switched to business. Small pieces of themselves, cautiously exchanged in the quiet hours when the office belonged only to them. "Why do you stay?" he asked one evening as they reviewed strategy for an upcoming merger. The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "Here, with me." Dominic leaned back in his chair, studying her with genuine curiosity. "You're overqualified for this position. You could be running your own department by now, possibly at any company you wanted." Valentina considered her answer carefully. "I stay because the work matters. What we're building here, it has purpose." She met his gaze directly. "And because beneath all your demands for perfection, you actually care about getting things right, not just profitable." He looked momentarily surprised, then thoughtful. "My father used to say that success without integrity is failure in disguise." Smart man. He was. A small smile touched his lips. You would have liked him. By day, they maintained their professional roles, employer and employee, each playing their part in the corporate theater. But in these evening moments, something else was taking root. A friendship, a partnership, perhaps something more that neither was ready to name. The office began to notice. Rumors circulated, as they always do, whispers about the Ice King and his devoted assistant. Valentina ignored them. She knew the truth was both simpler and more complex than office gossip could capture. Then came the night that changed everything. A simple dinner meeting with Japanese investors had run late. They were walking back to the office through a light rain when Dominic's phone rang. His expression darkened as he listened. "Camille," he said after hanging up, his voice tight with concern. "She's in the hospital." Without hesitation, Valentina flagged down a taxi. "I'll reschedule tomorrow's meetings, go." But as he opened the taxi door, he surprised her. "Come with me," he said, and it wasn't an order but a request. Perhaps even a plea. In that moment, the careful boundaries they had constructed began to crumble. Storm systems. The hospital corridor seemed endless, a fluorescent-lit tunnel of anxiety. Dominic strode ahead, his usual commanding presence now tinged with barely contained fear. Valentina followed, fielding urgent work calls and messages on her phone while keeping pace with his long strides. They found Camille in the emergency department, pale but alert, an IV in her arm and a monitor beeping steadily beside her. "It's just dehydration," she said before Dominic could speak, her voice weak but determined. "I fainted during gallery setup. You didn't need to come rushing over like this." "You're in a hospital bed," Dominic replied tersely, taking the chair beside her. "Of course I came." Valentina hung back, suddenly aware of her intrusion into this family moment. She was about to excuse herself when Camille noticed her. "You must be Valentina," she said, a knowing smile crossing her face despite her condition. "The miracle worker who keeps my brother functioning." "Ms. Reeves is here in a professional capacity," Dominic said quickly. Camille rolled her eyes. "Right, because all CEOs bring their assistants to family emergencies at 10 p.m. An awkward silence followed, broken only by the steady beep of the heart monitor. Valentina busied herself with rescheduling Dominic's morning meetings, giving the siblings space to talk. Hours passed. Doctors came and went. Tests were ordered, results delivered. By midnight, they confirmed Camille's self-diagnosis: severe dehydration and exhaustion, nothing more serious. "You need to take better care of yourself," Dominic lectured as they waited for discharge papers. "You're working too hard on this exhibition." "That's rich coming from you," Camille retorted. "When was the last time you took a day off? Or had a meal that wasn't in a conference room?" Their bickering continued, but Valentina noticed the affection underneath, the genuine concern flowing between them. It was a side of Dominic she'd glimpsed only rarely, this fierce protectiveness toward those he cared about. It was nearly 2 a.m. when they finally left the hospital. Rain had given way to a full-blown storm, thunder rolling across the sky as they helped Camille into the waiting car. "You'll stay at my place tonight," Dominic told his sister, his tone brooking no argument. "The guest room is made up." "Fine," Camille sighed, too tired to protest. "But only because my apartment is across town." They drove in silence through the empty streets, Camille dozing against the window. When they reached Dominic's penthouse, Valentina planned to call a car service and head home, but the storm had intensified to dangerous levels. "Stay," Dominic said as lightning illuminated the elegant foyer. "The roads are flooded. I have another guest room." Practicality won out over propriety. Once Camille was settled, Valentina found herself in a beautifully appointed guest suite, wearing borrowed pajamas and wondering how her professional life had become so thoroughly entangled with the personal. Sleep eluded her. Around 4 a.m., she gave up and ventured to the kitchen for water, only to find Dominic at the window, watching the storm, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. "You should be sleeping," she said softly. He turned, unsurprised by her presence. "So should you. Is Camille all right?" "Yes, finally resting." He gestured to the space beside him. "Join me?" She approached cautiously, accepting the second glass he offered. They stood in comfortable silence, watching lightning split the sky. "Thank you," he said finally, "for being there tonight." "It's my job." He shook his head slowly. "No, it's not. Not this part." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken words and careful restraint. They were standing close, too close for employer and employee, yet somehow not close enough. "Dominic," she began, testing his given name on her lips for the first time. "We can't," he said, though he didn't move away. "You work for me. There are rules, boundaries." "I know." She set down her glass. "But I'm not sure those rules apply anymore. Not to us." His expression softened, vulnerability once again replacing his careful control. "What are we doing, Valentina?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I think we've been doing it for a while now." Thunder crashed overhead as they stood at the precipice of something neither had planned for. In the lightning-illuminated kitchen, with the storm raging outside and sleeping sister down the hall, they faced the truth they'd been circling for months. They weren't just boss and assistant anymore. Perhaps they never had been. Dawn-breaking morning arrived with gentle persistence, sunlight filtering through dissipating clouds after the night's tempest. Valentina woke disoriented, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar surroundings before remembering the hospital, the storm, the conversation that had stretched until dawn. Nothing and everything had changed. They hadn't crossed any physical boundaries, hadn't made declarations or promises, but in the quiet hours between midnight and morning, they had acknowledged the truth that had been growing between them, a connection that transcended professional roles and careful distance. She found Dominic and Camille in the kitchen, an unusually domestic scene. Dominic, still in his dress shirt and slacks from yesterday, was making coffee while Camille sat at the island counter, looking much improved. "Morning," Camille said with a knowing smile. "Sleep well?" "As well as could be expected," Valentina replied diplomatically. Dominic handed her a cup of coffee, their fingers brushing in the exchange. "I've called a car for you. It should be here in 20 minutes. His tone was professional, but his eyes conveyed something else, uncertainty perhaps, or caution. The vulnerability of the night before had receded, replaced by daylight practicality. "Thank you," she said, matching his tone. "I'll need to stop home before heading to the office." "Take the morning," he replied. "I've cleared my schedule until noon." Camille watched this exchange with undisguised interest, her gaze bouncing between them. "You know," she said casually, "if you two are going to keep pretending there's nothing happening here, you might want to work on your poker faces." "Camille," Dominic warned. "What? I'm just saying what everyone at your company has probably been thinking for months." She sipped her tea innocently. "Besides, I like her. She makes you almost human." The car arrived, saving them from further discussion. Valentina gathered her things, thanked them both, and left with promises to check in later. The drive home gave her time to think, to consider what came next. By the time she arrived at the office that afternoon, she had made a decision. Dominic was in a meeting when she entered, but she could see him through the glass walls of the conference room. He glanced up, their eyes meeting briefly before he returned his attention to the presentation. She waited at her desk, the resignation letter saved on her computer, not because she wanted to leave, but because if they were going to explore what existed between them, it couldn't be within the confines of their current roles. When the meeting ended and the executives filed out, she entered his office without waiting for permission. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. Dominic looked up, his expression guarded. "About last night?" "No," she interrupted. "About tomorrow, and all the days after that." She placed the resignation letter on his desk. He stared at it, then at her, comprehension dawning in his eyes. "This isn't necessary," he said. "Yes, it is." Valentina remained standing, her resolve firm. "I care about this company, about the work we do, but I care about my integrity too, and yours. What are you proposing?" "Transfer me to strategic development. I have the qualifications. The position reports to the board, not to you directly. Or accept my resignation, and we can figure out what this is." She gestured between them. "Without the complications of a professional relationship." Dominic was silent for a long moment, studying her with the same intensity he applied to complex business problems. Finally, he stood and came around the desk to face her properly. "When I built this company after my father died," he said quietly, "I promised myself I would never let anything interfere with its success. That included personal relationships, attachments, distractions of any kind." Valentina nodded, preparing herself for rejection. "But I was wrong," he continued, surprising her. "Because in trying to be the perfect CEO, I forgot how to be human. Until you reminded me." He took the resignation letter from the desk and deliberately tore it in half. "Strategic development needs a new director. The board will approve your appointment this afternoon." A small smile touched his lips, and Dominic Westbrook would very much like to take Valentina Reeves to dinner. Not his assistant, not a colleague, just Valentina. "I'd like that," she replied, returning his smile. "Though I should warn you, I have opinions about your management style that I've been holding back for 18 months. He laughed then, a genuine sound that transformed his face. "I'm counting on it." In the weeks and months that followed, Westbrook Tower witnessed a subtle transformation. The demanding CEO remained exacting in his standards, still driven by the legacy of his father and his own ambitions. But those who knew him well noticed changes, moments of patience, flashes of humor, an occasional willingness to listen first and command second. And if anyone noticed that the former executive assistant, now director of strategic development, could calm his temper with a look or make him smile with a whispered comment in meetings, they were wise enough not to mention it directly. By day, they built his father's legacy together, each in their own domain but united in purpose. And in the evenings, they discovered what it meant to truly see each other, not as billionaire and employee, but as Dominic and Valentina, two people learning that the strongest towers aren't built of glass and steel, but of trust and understanding. The masks they had worn for so long now rested easily beside them, no longer needed but not forgotten, reminders of the journey that had brought them to each other, across professional boundaries and carefully maintained distances to the most unexpected destination of all.